Hey, children of the Most High. I found a pretty interesting article, and I wanted to bring it to you guys' attention. This is in New Zealand, and it states New Zealand to put COVID-19 patients into mandatory quarantine camp. And this is actually August 14th. This article came out. It says here, in a move right out of George Orwell's 1984, New Zealand has announced it will put all COVID-19 patients into mandatory quarantine camps. The Prime Minister of New Zealand has said that each and every activity will be monitored in these camps, and those that refuse to be tested will be forced to stay in the camp for a longer duration. Can you believe that? So if you refuse to be tested, you would stay in camp for a longer duration. New Zealand Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, announced at the press conference that the use of the quarantine facility marks a major departure from how positive cases were managed by health officials when New Zealand was at level 3, as cases earlier in the year were told to simply self-isolate in their homes. Dr. Bloomfield says the mandatory quarantine will apply to both new cases and, if necessary, close family members who might be at risk. So not only new cases, but any close family member will be at risk. If you refuse to test, they're going to lock you up, and you will continue to stay locked up until you test. So can you imagine when the vaccine is ready, what's going to happen? Okay, so it shows the seriousness on how we are about limiting the risk of ongoing transmission, even in self-isolation and including to others in the household, he added. A reminder of these facilities have been set up specifically and have excellent processes and resources in place to look after people with COVID-19, including health staff on the site at all times. It will help us avoid any further indifferent spread into the community as part of our overall response. The announcement didn't say how the quarantine would be. However, New Zealand Prime Minister Ardern in the Facebook Live video explained in detail how each and every activity will be monitored in these camps, your FEMA camps, okay? And those that refuse to be tested would be forced to stay in the camps for a longer duration. So let's hear what she says here.
Kia ora everyone. Trying to just mix up the Facebook Live venues. So today beaming in from the dining room table here at Premier House. So pretty stock standard really. Just a table with some of the usual features that usually you find in a family home. Chalkboard. Probably the one unusual piece of furniture that is here. I'll share this with you. These are the old cabinet chairs from back in the day.
Like the Rothschild emblem.
We of course make sure that nothing goes to waste, so they've been recycled and they're now our dining room chairs. Not always the most comfortable, which perhaps back in the day may have kept cabinet meetings short. Anyway, that is not the purpose for which I've popped onto a quick Facebook Live tonight. I just wanted to give you a quick update on the week ahead. And also just share a bit of information that I shared in the post-cabinet press conference that you might have not been able to make it to, or I'll give you the shortened version because those press conferences can be quite long. So the first thing, that it is a sitting week, so Parliament is in session, so that's where I'll be for the week. I've got a meeting with Waikato Tainui on Thursday, then some announcements in Auckland on Friday, and then Congress for the Labour Party on Sunday. And so anyway, for what it's worth, that's my movements for the week. What we announced today, though, does relate extra work that we're doing around making sure that we're constantly really tightening up what we're doing at the border. And so we've conducted an audit over the way our quarantine and isolation facilities are working, and so we made some announcements off the back of some of that work today. But I think before I do that, Riley, you're asking some questions around our current status. So before I get into announcements for today, just give you a bit of an update on where New Zealand currently sits with our COVID status. The first thing, we currently have 22 active cases. It's the first piece of information. The most important information, though, is that all of those cases are in facilities. So they're either in our managed isolation facilities, which are our monitored hotels, our quarantine facilities, or hospital. So all of them.
So 22. You guys heard that? Only 22 cases. But if you refuse to get tested, they're going to lock you up.
Have been caught at the border and in facilities. So when you hear people talking about community transmission, that is not what New Zealand has. Community transmission is when you have COVID in the community, you can't trace where it's come from, basically you have the risk of an outbreak, and that is not what we have in New Zealand. Our cases have been caught at the border, and that has been the case for the last 2 weeks. Those numbers you're hearing reported are at our border. So I thought that was a really important point to share. The second important point is some people are discussing whether or not actually we might have cases that we're just not picking up. Well, on that, again, just a few more facts to share. We have had in the last 13 days 80,000 tests. 80,000. Now that represents roughly 20% of all the tests that we've had over the period we've had COVID. So a really large chunk have been in the last 13 days. So that gives you a good sense. We have a pretty good idea. That means that we've gone from an on average rate of about 2,000 tests to 6,000 tests a day. So a big increase. Of all of that testing, of all of those 80,000 tests, all of the cases we've had have been at the border. They've been returning New Zealanders and permanent residents who have come home because the places where they are, COVID is getting worse, not better. And of course, in New Zealand, we have really open movement because we've managed to date to control the virus. Overall, the international status is not good. Globally, 10 million cases, 500,000 deaths. It's predicted that we will not see the peak of COVID in some countries, Africa, South Asia, until potentially July. And so that does mean we will continue to need to really manage at the border everyone who's coming in. So a couple of extra things that we've done over the past 2 weeks. So obviously 2 weeks ago we recognised that there were some things that needed to be tightened up. Keeping in mind there is no rule book here. We've had to work out our own regime, and it is tougher than most. We are quarantining everyone who comes in at the border. Some countries are not doing that. And now we're also mandating testing. So we do a test in week 1 and a test in week 2, and that's because some people, of course, won't show up as having COVID in that first test, and we want to check people before they depart. We are mandating it, so there are only a very small number of reasons why you can't, and it will relate to things like you're a small child or there's a medical reason. Otherwise, we are mandating it. Again, that makes us the most stringent in the world. There are countries who are requiring self-isolation. We've taken it a step further. And so what we've also done today is really enhance what we're doing with PPE in those facilities as well. So when we did an audit of the facilities, and we've since then we've doubled the number of Defence Force staff, We have AVSEC staff who are working in there as well. We've got the extra work we've done on the testing. We're now making sure we've got more consistent use of PPE, so protective equipment. If anyone moves into a common area or is getting some fresh air, which is all monitored, no one can do that on their own. They can or be in a space to get a little bit of fresh air if they are supervised, because of course it's a quarantine facility. So we're just making sure we've got consistent use of PPE now. So we've put millions of dollars into supporting that to happen as well. So that's just, actually there'll be some, given that we have, the equivalent of a small town in New Zealand. I think someone told me today, the equivalent of Kirikiri in quarantine at present. So that gives you an idea of the number that we've got. Increasing numbers, of course, because New Zealanders are coming home, and often from quite dire situations and circumstances. Now, there is a bit of conversation about whether or not there should be charging. We are looking at some of the issues there.
They're going to charge you too.
One, thing to keep in mind is that these are returning New Zealanders. They have a right to live and be in New Zealand and the right to come home. And so, there are some legal issues there around whether or not we can be charging. But it is something that we're exploring, but we're factoring in all of those really complex issues as well. So look, that's just one of the some of the issues that I wanted to. I've got a number of questions about people refuse. What do we do if someone refuses to be tested? Well, they can't now. If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested, they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. They have to stay on for another 14 days. So it's a pretty good incentive. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. So I think most people will look at that and say, I'll take the test. So as I've said at the very beginning, look, there has been no playbook here. As we've seen issues, we've worked to tighten up. We know where our biggest threat is, and that is the border. So we are working to really tighten that up in the way that we manage that. There are suggestions around opening up borders. I personally see at this point in time, I see that as generally opening them up. I just see that as a dangerous suggestion. So obviously for us, any consideration of our borders all needs to be managed safely. I'm seeing a couple of questions from people around New Zealanders and different circumstances offshore. And look, just on that, of course, New Zealanders there are commercial flights available for New Zealanders to get back, and that's why we've had a 73% increase in New Zealanders coming home since April, because flights are opening up. It is possible for people to.
Okay, so there you have it. I wanted to bring that to your attention because, of course, they're doing that in New Zealand. Of course, they're going to be doing it elsewhere. And I do remember a statement that President Trump made, that he also did some type of executive order that if you needed to be tested and you refuse, that you can be detained. I'll look that up actually and go on and stick that on the video as well. But I thank you guys for listening, and I want to know what you think about what New Zealand is doing. And I know it's going to be nationwide. They're going to, they have to start somewhere on tightening everything up, as she says. And so let me know what you think about this down in the comment section. Thank you very much. God bless you and your family. Stay close to the Father. Hug and kiss your wife. Pray without ceasing. And look up, our redemption draws nigh. Rapture is coming soon. Love you all. Bye now.